Welcome back to Chatty Ramble. My guest today, we're in for a bit of a treat today. My guest today is the lovely Sarah Lloyd from Indigo. Oh my God, I can't speak. Sorry, Sarah. Indigo
Okay.
Soul PR. Blimey. So Sarah works with the woo-woo people, the people like us that just cannot possibly tell our story. That's what Sarah's told me PR is about. She'll obviously explained it far better than me. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm sorry I made a fluff.
Oh, don't be
I'm gonna...
daft. I'm loving it. No, it's great. Because this is what I do. And this is part of it. It's about, being your complete, true, authentic self. And whilst I do PR for people, I also try and encourage them to come from that place of truth and integrity. So I'm all here for it.
Wonderful. So PR, what does it stand for? I'm sure people do know, but they'll be going, PR, what's PR?
Yeah, so PR is public relations. A lot of people, when you say public relations, they think of absolutely fabulous and people falling in ditches, drunk and stuff. And I mean that there is an element of that, used to be. But I always like to say PR, simply put, is when somebody else, more often than not the media, says your stuff is good. So it's about essentially speaking to the press and getting them to share your stories on your terms, and that then leads to authority logos on websites, and people actually, even though the last few years it's been quite difficult because of obviously various things that have been going on globally, the media is still very much a source of information and is believed by a lot of people. So that's basically what I do. I kind of bridge the gap between the woo-woo people and get those people in the media. So we wake up a few more as we go.
I love that idea. So how the hell do you get somebody like, okay, well, let tabloid and broadsheet newspapers,
Yeah.
who historically are so like that direction, do you approach those kind of guys? Do you actually even get them to listen to you?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And I've been featured as well. So I've walked my talk as well. I've been in those shoes too. And I think that's really important because I can then share with people what it's actually like. Um, so for example, the Daily Mail and You Magazine, the team there are very connected spiritually. They are very curious about sound healing and crystals and moon cycles, and there is a curiosity and there is a personal, I think, interest in some of the members of the team. And they move with the trends. I mean, there's a lot more, you see a lot more mainstream personalities are talking, like, I mean, you just have to listen to Chris Evans in the morning.
Yeah.
He's now got Kirsty Gallagher on there talking about moon cycles and astrology, and you'd never have thought of that with Chris Evans. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched his old programs, but there's no way in hell he would have been talking about that then. So I very much believe that the spaces that we're occupying is becoming, well, they're joining, and it's beautiful because what we're trailblazing in the sort of more spiritual circles is we've kind of stepped forwards and worked on our journeys, and therefore we can now hold the space for the others who are a few steps behind us, who may be searching for something more, something bigger. But the media is about, I guess it's not just about who it's about also how the story connects to what's going on in the mainstream. So it's about connecting your dots. That's like the term I always used.
This is true. So we're in the year of the dragon.
Yes, very
So
much.
it would be so cool to get the Daily Mail or somewhere like that with dragons, because it's topical.
Yes.
And
it's in my I'd love to like get that let's manifest that together. I'd love to get
yeah,
around.
let's talk after the show if we get time, because that would be awesome to get, because it's Year of the Dragon. That'd be so cool to get something in mainstream about dragons. Oh, how exciting.
There's so
Anyway,
many people working with them too, right? And I know that everyone's feeling that
yeah,
right now.
absolutely. So how did you, so before we came on air, you said about that you've got, God, you've got a quarter of a century, 25 years of PR experience. Was your day job, has been your day job.
Yeah, it's
So
basically my life.
how did you go from, were you corporate PR at one time?
Yeah.
So how did you make that transition from corporate PR to woo woo ambassador PR lady?
Well, this is the thing. I have no idea.
Oh,
Well, I mean, there is an element of, so, I mean, just to take you back sort of 6, 7 years ago when I was still in my corporate business. I was still working in, I had quite a global, quite a big role at the time, working with agencies across the world. And my second daughter was about 8 months old, and I returned to work, and it wasn't, well, it never is. I assumed that it would be just the same as it was when my first kid was born, and everything will be fine and I can handle it. But it was not to be the case. And that's what led me to finding. So I found a vortex and Reiki healer to help me with clearing some of the blocks and the energy. I mean, that was basically what happened. Is a friend of mine said, well, you're dealing with postnatal depression, go and see this healer, she's amazing. So I went and saw this healer. She cleared some big blocks from my system. Archangel Michael appeared during the session and basically told me to get on and sort out my energy. I was like, okay. So I then went down the path of training to be a Reiki master whilst continuing to work in my corporate environment. And the more I worked with my energy, the more I could see it was, my body was telling me I was getting vertigo, I was seeing black energy, I was seeing back pain. I had bad anxiety as well, and I was less and less going to the office, but also I had a new boss. And basically I ended up having days where I was just sitting there spinning on my chair going, well, okay, well, this is lovely, but what am I here to do? And I remember coming back from a big event, and I'd been reading Rebecca Campbell's books and noticed that she was doing her first ever retreat in Glastonbury, and I'd had this big kind of call to Glastonbury. So then I went off, I signed up to her first retreat, ended up in circle with her. I was still in my business, my role at this time, and basically just sat there and just like wept for a week, as you do, and then manifested a redundancy somehow. Basically 4 months later, my boss said, look, you're not, you can't go backwards, and there's nowhere for you to go forward, so we'll offer you voluntary redundancy, or you can go sideways and work somewhere you've never worked before. And I was like, well, I've been training in this one thing for most of my life. Why would I go and do something else in the same company? So it was a real sliding door moment where I just left and took the redundancy and basically just set up my own business. But what was really beautiful is some of the women that were sat in that circle on retreat, they were telling me their stories and telling me about their businesses, and 2 or 3 of them became my first clients. So I was supporting them running retreats and getting their books out there, and it just kind of grew. And as a result of that, I was reaching out to different media titles. And I mean, I've never been afraid to have the conversations and pitch out the stories, because I mean, had good grounding when I worked in an agency, because you'd have like 15 different clients and offering different products and services. Therefore, you needed to be brave and have the conversations. So yeah, just kind of went from there really. And I have ended up working with some amazingly magical people over the years. So I've seen it as a real exchange of energy where I've helped them to get their stories out there, but I've also learned so much from them as well.
Wow. And I know we spoke about this briefly before we came on air, And there's something about sharing your story that is incredibly cathartic, because most spiritual people, and I'll include myself in this because I'm probably as bad as I probably am as bad as anybody else, if not maybe slightly worse, that we actually don't like talking about ourselves. We'll talk about our work all day long, but actually talking about ourselves, and for me, I'm incredibly private and personal, and I'm sure I'm probably an introvert, really. So actually sharing your story with somebody that you've built a relationship with and you trust has got to be incredibly healing and cathartic, because you're handing your heart and your baby over to somebody else to talk about it on your behalf. So you've got that slight removal that you're not putting your soul on the line to the Daily Mail, who's going to say, oh, what rubbish, what nonsense, not really going to bother talking to you, to somebody who's actually can do it in a way that gets your story, I suppose, noticed and seen. Of course, I know there's never any guarantees with PR, but it's just, I don't know, it's almost like it feels like a very empowering moment with that people, individuals who are sharing their story go, I can feel this in my heart chakra going, oh my God. So it's got to be really empowering when there's some kind of kickback or feedback from that helps people be seen and heard.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been through it myself. Basically, there was a point where there was an opportunity in the Daily Mail, and it was the feature line was, I have a secret. I have a secret from my spouse. So it's a horrendous headline. However, I spoke to the journalist and just said, look, my husband married me and didn't realize I was completely woo-woo spiritual, speaking to angels and hugging trees and playing with fairies. And she was like, this is brilliant. And I was like, okay, this could be an interesting one. And it was a real lump in the throat moment when I explained to her, that and as I was saying, I was in my corporate environment, but before that, when I was a kid, and I think this is, I hear this story so much with other people, in that they were very spiritual as kids. When we were children, you're playing with crystals, or you're seeing imaginary people, or, making potions with your petals, and all of those things that kids do. And then somewhere along the line, there's about 10 or 15 years where that doesn't come into it anymore, because you're growing up and you're trying to fit in the world. And then there's this other moment at the other end where you something happens and you go, actually, I'm going back to that because it's much more fun. And that was basically what my story was about. It was I used to do this, and then I've now, I trained as an angelic healer, and I was working, doing Reiki, and I was doing the PR as well. And the story was just about, having this secret, which was, I was, crazy coconut woman that and this was 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, people were still a little bit skeptical about all of this. And when the piece came out, I just remember it so vividly. I was like, oh my God, I'm in the Daily Mail this morning. I'm going to get stoned at the school gate. And
yes, but that's it. It's that witch wound, isn't it? It's that witch wound that we all carry.
Yeah. But what was amazing and what happened is I had about 6 or 7 mums stop me on the way going, I saw you in the Daily Mail. Do you do Reiki? Do you read tarot? I read tarot. Oh, can you do my card? And it was it was not expected.
Wow.
And it was wow, okay, there are a lot of women who are tuned into this. And by sharing these stories, we're making it okay for these other women to do that. We're all effectively coming out the closet and owning those feminine gifts that we've hidden for so long. The intuition, the psychic, everyone has an element of psychic knowing, don't they? And working with that and embracing that. I think that side of us, that creative side, has always been sidelined or diminished. So it was about empower, you know, having that the courage to tell that story.
Wow.
It's a bit silly, really, but I had people from my past going, I didn't know that about you. So, well, yeah, I didn't really go around telling everyone that, but it's kind of it was kind of a real amazing moment actually doing that in the paper. And then it made me step into that even more. It was almost like, well, now you've done it, you've said it now, and you've got
Now
to
you've got to own it.
basically.
And it's got to give also that it's because it's coming into that alignment with our soul truth, isn't it? Because so often, you know, so many people push that to one side
Yeah.
because they've got to do the day job, they've got to make a living, yada, yada, yada. And as you said, people push away that spiritual aspect. But when you come into alignment and you honor, own, embrace that spiritual side of you, well, it doesn't matter how big or small it is, but you embrace it, whether you're either a natural empath or a healer or a tea leaf reader. When you embrace that side of you, again, it's that coming into alignment, and then life seems to flow because you're not fighting with yourself either, are you, as much?
No, that's exactly right. And I think as well, what also I didn't appreciate is it was a massive door opening to really stepping into what I really wanted to do, which was I'd done the thing where I'd created this PR business, and then I'd also created my Reiki business. And of course, Reiki, well, it was crickets, quite frankly. There was no one coming, you know. I'd created this space and I'm going to be this healer, and it was like, no, you're not. You're going to do it, and you're going to work your healing business. Your healing is in the PR business. So that was basically the big nudge that I got. It was around, you know, okay, you can embrace all of this. And that news piece was the universe, I feel, saying, there you go. You've always been like this. Now own it.
Absolutely. And help other people on their journeys to do the same thing,
Yeah.
to share their story. And it's got to be incredibly healing for so many people, because, you know, we all carry this witch wound of we're afraid of being seen, we're afraid of being heard, we're afraid of being judged, which all is that whole ancestral thing, you know, from the burning times. So it takes a level of courage, I think, to put your head above the parapet. You know, because I remember when my cards were first published, it was the most terrifying moment ever.
I can
A bit
imagine.
less so when the book came out, but when the cards did, it was like, Jesus, who am I kidding? What am I doing? Must, you know, waiting for the onslaught of to be burnt again, to be, you know, stoned and whatever, as you said, like at the school gates. But to have that somebody who walks your path with you, that can support you as you tell your story and bring your gifts into the world in an aligned way that shares it with a larger audience,
Yeah.
has got to be hugely empowering for people.
Yeah, I just love supporting people in
Wow.
finding those moments, and you know that healing that they experience. And you know, it does come with bumps, and you know, as with anything, with any healing journey. But it's funny, when just before we joined, I hadn't appreciated what I do is actually a healing modality, in that fact that we do, when we show up in our complete integrity and in our complete truth, you know, that's the one thing that stops people from sharing, is they're worried that they're going to get stoned at the school gate, or they're going to get attacked. But actually, if you're completely okay with your warts and all,
Yeah.
it shouldn't matter at all. You know, it's like that, you know, being that witch, wearing the wart on your chin, you know, happily.
Absolutely.
It's
And, you
like,
know,
it doesn't matter if someone points it out to you, because you know it's there.
absolutely. Yes, exactly that. So what sort of people do you work with? Now, have you got, you've got have you got the, like, the really famous people in our field, or do you work with, like, the local Reiki healer? Well, no, where do you sit in the field of hierarchy of the spiritual world?
It's funny because I've worked with lots of different people in the last 5 years. I work with Karen Kay, who is the fairy lady, does works with mermaids and stuff. And one big highlight for me was getting her on this morning.
Oh, that's how she did it. I wondered how she did it. I was talking to Karen, actually. Karen was in my I was talking to Karen. She was in my last episode before, recently anyway.
Well, the first ever time, so she hired me and said, I've had the fairy festival coming up, and it was a good few years ago now, and she basically said, I just want to be on this morning. And it's like, well, I can see you being there. I could visualize it and see it. I just didn't know what was really interesting about that experience is I was phoning the production company, I was pitching it out to the news editor at This Morning. I was going through what you would call the traditional routes, and it just wasn't happening. I was like, what am I missing? What am I missing? And in the end, I ended up speaking to this amazing freelancer that I know who works for lots of different publications. And she basically pitched the story to the Daily Express, I think, at the time, and invited Karen and a few of the other fairies into the paper to have a photo shoot. And there was a beautiful double-page spread that was done. I went along with them, and we had loads of fun that day. You can imagine 3 fairies like laughing, whooping it up at the Daily Mail, at the Daily Express, should I say. So they were having an amazing photo shoot, and that appeared. And then I think they used it again in another paper, and then Karen got the phone call from This Morning to say, can you come on with your fairies, because we've seen you in the paper. So it wasn't through traditional routes. We knew it would happen, but it was a chain reaction of
God.
Oh.
Sorry. I love it. Anything happens, and everything happens on this show. It's, and we don't edit it out. It's completely real. Unless the phone rings, you've got to take a private call. Other than that, we keep it all real. So do you think, because obviously the people you work with are spiritual, and you have that, as are you, do you think there's an element of manifestation in this? We're bringing in your people, your clients, and there's like an alchemical reaction,
and
definitely. It's manifestation at work in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel there was a point in time in my spiritual journey where I was sitting around meditating, thinking it was all just going to come, like sitting there and, yes, if I sit here and meditate long enough, it will all appear. But actually, what I realized
like that
is, and because I think coming from a real masculine corporate environment, it was always about the doing and never sitting there and celebrating what you had done and the being. There was none of that. So I'd gone from very much treadmill, keep going, to then being made redundant, to then sort of, oh, well, I'm going to sit on my mountain and meditate for a bit and like enjoy it, and magical things will happen. And actually, it did happen, but they happen very slowly. And then what I realized is that you kind of need a balance. So I still create strategy for my clients. There is still like a story arc that we go through, and there is still actions that I take, but I always set an intention when I work with a client. So we'll always do a prayer and call in the people that need to be called in to support that person. So there is an element of intention setting, manifesting, vision boarding, but also taking action, making phone calls, doing the doing. And one thing that I've always done, and this is something that I only realized when I wrote my own book, was I've always worked intuitively. Someone would give me a list and go, phone all those people on that list and pitch out that story. And I would go, I'm not doing that. And I'd pick, like, I'd intuitively go, oh, actually, that name looks quite good. I'll ring them. And it would land, the coverage would land. So that's how I've always worked. So I might get a big long list, but if I don't feel like ringing the whole list, then I don't. I tend to work with my gut instinct. So I guess there's a balance.
I used to do that actually. I used to work for a building company. We used to build bespoke, seriously like multi-million-pound houses, and one-off houses, multi-million-pound price tags. and my boss would give me like a list of trades to ring, and I go, well, I ain't ringing that one. Oh no, that one's completely off. No, definitely not ringing them. And there'd be, and I end up with 3, and there's always one I would want to work with. I say, look, I'm feeling that you guys just feel like you're a good fit for us as a company, actually, but you're out of our budget. Sharpen your pencil, come back with a new price. And I'd normally get them, and they're normally banging. I don't think I was ever let down by any tradesman that I
That's
work
amazing.
with.
Well, that just goes to show you are working with your intuition as well.
Completely. And it's interesting, isn't it, how when you follow that inner knowing, it just makes life so much easier.
Yes. But also there is a bit of like, well, I should have maybe rung those as well.
Should have what?
It's when you're questioning your intuition, like someone did say to me, said, well, I don't understand it. You get all these results, but I don't know how, you just seem to magically, these things happen. And it's like, you've got no method. I was like, yeah, there is no method in my madness. I literally just go with what I feel. And that wasn't enough, should we say.
Sure. Oh well. But the thing is, when you go with that, and I actually had a real proof of that today. I was supposed to meet a friend for coffee early this morning, and they didn't show up. And I know they've not been well. And it's like, couldn't get hold of them on the phone. Oh, okay. And in my head, I was going, they've had a really bad couple of nights. My intuition was saying they've had a really bad couple of nights. They've not been sleeping well. They've just overslept. They've just slept through their alarm. Don't worry about it. So I took the dogs out, came back 10:30, still nothing from them. I thought, right, I'm getting in the car and I'm going over there. I want to be sure. In my head, there's all these awful scenarios going on. I'd literally just started the car and they rang and said, I'm fine. And I said, I knew you were fine. My intuition, my knowing was you were absolutely fine. However, there was that ego, fear side of me was going, you better just go and check. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
How we can get caught up in that negative narrative too so easily, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
If we're not careful.
Yes. So that was the Karen thing. And then
Excellent.
who else have I worked with? So I worked with a Swami, a yoga Swami who was based in Spain. And that was an experience. So I've worked with lots of different kind of versions of spirituality. I worked with a female celebrant. I worked with, who else have I? So Diana Cooper, I did a little project with her last year, which was amazing to be in the energy of Diana.
Excellent.
So yeah, I mean, I guess, and I've also, I'm really lucky to be affiliated with the Unbound Press, which is a publishing imprint that I help get a lot of their authors out there. So that's been amazing, just like helping women who are telling their stories in books and then further promoting them. So that's been absolutely joyful, to be honest. So
Wonderful. Now, you said just now that you've written your own book.
I have, but I've got to hold myself accountable for this. I'm going to actually update it because it came out, my book Connecting the Dots came out in February 2020, just before everything kicked off. So things have changed since I wrote that.
Okay, so you're gonna do a rewrite on it, are you?
Yeah, I'm going to do a rewrite, but you can still get it, and a lot of the information is still solid. It's just, some of it was of its time, should we say? And I also wrote a book called Wake Up Mother last year. It came out last year. It was a collaboration of a lot of women who, I mean, I think it was more of a personal project than anything else. But as a mother, I realized that it was a massive part of my stepping into my motherhood. So I gathered 13 other women. We wrote a chapter each, and we sat on calls for 9 months together and birthed this beautiful book, which is basically about anyone who's in the mother energy, which can either be as a mum with physical children, but people who are birthing projects, holding spaces for other people, people, women who've chosen not to be physical mothers, but are mothers in other guises. So it was a real lovely project to work on. So that's available as well.
So on Amazon.
Yeah, it is. Everything's on Amazon, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, my book's on Amazon. We're all on Amazon, aren't we? We couldn't live without the likes of Amazon today, could we? So how do people find you, Sarah?
You can find me on my website. It's www.indigosoulpr.com, and I'm quite active on Instagram as well, so you can find me on there.
Don't use Facebook?
I do, but I'm more of an Instagram person.
An Instagram girl. No, absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed our chat. We'll put all Sarah's links below, and any workshops or anything else that's sort of relative and relevant that's coming up, or anything she's got that's important. We'll all be stuck in the links below, and you can stalk her, sign her up, do whatever. But she's your girl. If you want to get out there, she's your girl. Guess what I'm doing after this call? I'll be talking to her about dragons, the Daily Mail. Thank you so much for joining me, guys, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Bye for now.